People often say that loneliness is the greatest enemy of your own mind, and that it's what leads you into temptation, and it's what leads you into sin and things like that. And for the most part, they'd be right. But a perspective I'd like to offer is, how do you transform loneliness into your best friend? Because if you think about it, loneliness is the most loyal companion that you have, aside from God, of course. But I think God allows us to feel lonely sometimes. I think that is why even Jesus felt lonely at times. In fact, most of the time, in regard to the fact that he knew exactly what the people around him were going to do to him, and he knew exactly what it meant to follow God, and just how narrow that path would be, and just how difficult that path would be. And because of how difficult it is to be on that path of holiness, he realized that not many people would be willing to follow him. And in fact, the majority of the people of his time did not believe. And so the path that he walked, that he accepted when he submitted to his Father's will, was one of a lonely path. And it was the path to greatness, though. And this is what you see across all different sports and fields and all sorts of leaders throughout the world, with the fact that when they're at the top, what they always tell people is that no one tells you about just how lonely being at the top is, because there's no one there except for yourself. And when you have no one to lead you, when you have no one to be that example for you, and you're leading the way, no one tells you how to make up these new rules. No one tells you, you know, where's the next path, right, and where you should step next. And so you're the one who's going to have to figure that out and, beat the trail for everyone else. And that's difficult. There's a burden to that. And there's a big responsibility that comes with, greatness. And part of that burden is feeling extremely lonely, not just at times, but for the longest time, and maybe even an entire lifetime. And I think one way to transform that loneliness into something different, something that can feel your sense of purpose, is understanding the fact that that feeling at the end of the day is the only feeling that never truly goes away in this lifetime. I think most people put it off, and most people distract themselves with, all these sort of noise and pleasures and just all the excitement and fun and the high emotions of life. But if you've never experienced life, you know that those feelings are temporary, those moments are temporary. That the moments where you're at the top and you feel like you're at the top don't last. And even for people who others see from the outside are constantly at the top of their game and constantly a shining star or example of what it means to be a good person, I bet you if you really asked them how they felt, most of them would not say that it feels that way most of the time. I would be willing to bet everything that most of the time they would say that they feel alone in this journey. And so take comfort in the fact that that loneliness and that sense of longing and that void that exists in all of us, I don't think there's a single person that doesn't feel that emptiness inside. And those who say they wouldn't and are truly fulfilled, I would say to you, are just in the moment right now where things are good, and they feel that sense of purpose. But again, that's just feel. And what it means to be faithful and to walk in purpose is not always the same as feeling like you're on that path. And oftentimes, I don't think people really feel exactly where they're at the same time. And what I mean by that, I mean, a lot of times when you're doing something great, it doesn't feel great. And only after you accomplish that goal or achieve that success will you look back and say, oh yeah, I was doing something good. But, you wouldn't have any proof for that at the time. And so it doesn't feel like it. You didn't have any of those rewards. You didn't have any of that praise at the time. And so I would say that when we're talking about this feeling of this void and loneliness, not only take comfort in the fact that it doesn't go away, but again, why should you take comfort in the fact that loneliness, this feeling that people often associate with negativity and something that will lead you into something worse? I think it's similar for feelings like boredom, in the fact that you have nothing to do. You don't know what to do. Or you know exactly what you could do, but you just don't feel like doing it. Similar to how loneliness is the feeling of feeling like you have no one around you. You feel like you have no one who understands you. I think the reason that God allows these feelings to constantly exist in our life is because He knows where our hearts truly reside. He knows where our hearts truly yearn for, which is heaven, and which is God Himself. And I think part of the experience of what it means to be human is to learn that as good as this world is, as good as the things are in our lifetime, nothing will ever quite satisfy them like God does. And it's using that boredom, it's using that feeling of loneliness to turn towards God instead of turning away from Him and turning to the world. And so in times that you're lonely, in times that you're bored, remember that what you're feeling, yes, it is normal. Yes, it is something that everyone feels, but it is also a sign and a reminder of your greater purpose here. And so if you've ever been someone to struggle with what your purpose is in life, use this time to reflect. Use this as an opportunity to remember and really feel what God is trying to speak in your heart. And you're not going to hear His voice as, you would a friend or a person speaking out loud, as any human would, but He speaks to you in a way that you feel. And I think that's why we feel the emotions that we feel, even when we don't quite understand why. And I think people completely, kind of box the emotion or feeling of loneliness as a completely negative one, and that there's no good reason to feel these things. But while it doesn't feel great, I think the purpose is the same as what pain teaches us, what any sort of hard work, what any sort of, what any sort of sacrifice teaches us in life, which is that you have to be willing to give something up. You have to be willing to endure some pain in order for something greater. And the pain of loneliness, I think, is meant to teach us that there is somebody out there who we need to turn to rely on. And it can't be ourselves. Because as you understand, a lifetime of loneliness and only depending on yourself for your sense of comfort and your sense of happiness and purpose is very empty and shallow. And you realize soon enough that as much as the world tells you that you can create your peace or create your own happiness or find your own purpose, that you're only going to get so far thinking that way. You're only going to be able to sustain that for so much longer. And the only thing that will truly sustain that empty void in your heart and that sense of loneliness is heaven, is God. And I think that is the only thing that ultimately matters in the end, which is what the point of this lifetime is. What is the point of human experience and suffering is to learn that as good as the world is, it's not everything, and this lifetime is not everything, and that as hopeful as we want to be, that's, we can find all these things out ourselves. People have been making that same mistake for thousands of years, and just look at the inevitability of the fact that everyone dies. Everyone, no matter how rich or poor they were, end up in the same place, which is 6 feet under or in ashes, death. And that is inevitable. And it's in seeking something greater than yourself, seeking something even beyond death. And, you have two choices. That is either heaven or hell. And I don't think God wants to punish you for not choosing Him, but you've had the signs. You felt them. This sense of longing. Your heart will only rest in God. Our hearts are restless until we rest in you, says St. Augustine, and it is true. I think God gives us these gifts of loneliness and boredom and pain and suffering. He allows these things to exist in this world, not because they feel good, but because they show us just exactly how broken we are and how much we need God. He was our creator, and we think that we're just independent of Him, but really we're not. Yes, He gives us the free will to choose Him or not, and that's what real love is. It is a choice. And so it's up to you to listen to those signs, my friend. And so to sum it up, don't allow loneliness to only feed your negative emotion and your negativity about this world and this lifetime, but rather take comfort in the fact that loneliness is your most loyal friend, is a constant reminder of exactly where your heart lives, where your heart desires to live in this lifetime, which is heaven. Heaven is yours, my friend. God has given you this gift, so don't ignore it.